All right, welcome to another episode of The Catholic Couple Having Fun with Faith, Family, and Friends. I'm your co-host, Bobby Fredrickson. With me, as always, my beautiful wife,
Katie Fredrickson.
I'm the convert Catholic, and she's the
cradle Catholic.
And here we are on a brand new episode where Twitter is abuzz about convert Catholics and what they think about the faith and this whole idea of ordered love, or the Latin phrase Ordo Amoris, which means ordered love. So we're going to try to unpack what the recent Vice President JD Vance said on the show that sparked this outrage on Twitter, and to try to unpack it from
what are people outraged about?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about. So they're outraged about that there is ordered love and that's not Christian. So some people on the left are saying that ordered love isn't a thing. We should love everybody the same all the time in all situations. And that people are using this as a way towards xenophobia and nativism and things like that. And then on the right, it's, making a defense for what we call as the Catholic social teaching of subsidiarity, that we are to love those closest to us. It's
one side enraged.
So it's one side. Well, it's all the way it always is. Whatever issue it is, you can't make all the people happy all the time, and people have their opinions. And to me, what I've started to understand is that it's a both and. It's not an either or. So that's what we're going to try to unpack in this episode. So let's start with a prayer, for that anybody who's listening can understand where we're coming from, and then try to understand what the Bible's teaching, what Jesus is teaching. So let's start with the prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit. Lord, we pray that all those who are listening and watching will be inspired to study for themselves deeper what the Scripture and what Jesus is teaching us of how to treat one another, how we are to love you above all, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. Help us not to use ordered love as an excuse to exclude others, but help us to have a better appreciation for what love really is, which is sacrifice. Help us to sacrifice for others and for each other. We ask this in the mighty name of your Son, Jesus Christ.
Amen.
In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
For those people that don't go on Twitter, can you explain a little more? You're kind of operating out of an assumption that people know what you're talking about, which I think there might be me included, people that aren't on Twitter that might not understand what this is.
Yeah. So there was, JD Vance has been on the circuit going around the news, and he got first into a dust up with Margaret. I think she's from CBS, where JD Vance, who's a Catholic.
Is that that Face the Nation show?
Face the Nation. Yeah. He's a Catholic convert. So
he watched that. I know.
Yeah. So he was explaining about what's going on in the government and some of these programs, and it's like whatever, when any side takes over, then the other side's mad about what they're changing the way things are, but they got elected to do these things. So he's explaining it, and then he got kind of controversial.
So our Catholic faith got put into the political arena is basically what you're saying. So now people are talking about these
bigger ideas on why we do these things, and what's the thing behind it, other than because my party says so. JD Vance then went on, I believe, the Sean Hannity Show, and he started to say why he believes these principles, like America first and things like that. So let's start with we'll show you guys this clip. JD Vance on the Sean Hannity Show,
who himself is a convert.
He's a convert
Catholic
who was basically converted through Dominicans who are Thomistic. They follow
St. Thomas Aquinas.
They're the order of the Dominicans, and St. Thomas Aquinas was a Dominican, but their spirituality is like Thomism. They're preachers, and they're really heady,
highly intellectual.
Yes. So we're going to show you the clip now. It's JD Vance talking about this.
But there's this old school, and I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country. And then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world. A lot of the far left has completely inverted that. They seem to hate the citizens of their own country and care more about people outside their own borders. That is no way to run a society. And I think the profound difference that Donald Trump brings to the leadership of this country is the simple concept, America first. It doesn't mean you hate anybody else. It means that you have leadership, and President Trump has been very clear about this, that puts the interests of American citizens first. In the same way that the British Prime Minister should care about Brits and the French should care about the French, we have an American president who cares primarily about Americans, and that's a very welcome change.
What is President Xi doing? What is Vladimir Putin
He's looking
doing?
after the Chinese. Putin is looking after the Russians. That they're entitled to do that. Thank God we now have an American president who's looking after the citizens of his own.
So he's unpacking this idea of which I can see where people can come from to see the other side. So we're going to unpack both sides about like why.
Oh, how Thomist of you.
Well, I think that
Thomas Aquinas of you.
Like I said, as I matured and I've gotten to study more about my faith, it's always a both and. But the way that God sets it up, there is a hierarchy and there is an order to the way that things are. So we're going to go through and unpack what this Latin phrase, and then he goes on later to get in a Twitter spat with, you know, some other people, and theologians started chiming in. But there was this Rory guy who was an MP from England in Parliament who was criticizing him to say, well, what about the Good Samaritan? And what about, you know, loving your neighbor? And so we're going to unpack all that. Like, what does that mean? And how both sides use this as a cudgel to beat each other with. And when we should look at it as a both and, that the policy of solidarity with the whole world, with our neighbors, Christ died for, you know, for everybody, but also that the best way to love people is by loving those who are closest to you first. And we've talked about that on other episodes.
You know, I think God does put specific people in our lives on purpose, right? I don't think there's ever an accidental person put in your life, right? So yeah, I think it makes sense, but it can't be an either or. It's not only about those people, but that should be where your primary focus is at first. I guess I think of as a mother, I need to be sure that I'm tending to my children first before I'm tending to someone else's children, right? And that is difficult when I was like a teacher to balance that. So I think that it makes sense, but I can see, and this is what's hard about emotionally charged things and about how much the media and just certain ideologies and indoctrinations we've allowed it too much to control a narrative that erases the need for a dialogue. And I'm praying that more dialogue comes back into our culture instead of just pure canceling, right? Instead of saying, oh, you're this, you're canceled, you're wrong, that's not right, it's this. Just for the mere fact of that, I don't agree with your political views and your side, and you bad, me good, your idea bad, my idea good, instead of an actual dialogue, which is where so many of these, you know, these truths that have lasted throughout time are truths that have lasted throughout time because there's really, because of these of ways to test them and to intellectually have discussions and debates over them. But when we get rid of that, we're allowing some of these ideas that really can't be realistic to start to take shape.
Yeah, well, I started getting, you know,
they're more ideologues, the ideal, but actual reality hits.
When the rubber hits the road,
reality hits, they're not.
They sound good in theory.
They sound so great in theory, and yeah,
love everybody the same, love everybody like that.
But in reality, it's not. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Well, first let's take a step back. The way that God created the universe is hierarchical. He is above everything else. He is the top. So if you looked at it as a pyramid, God's up top. Period. End of story. We're underneath that. Then God created all these things in
angels
Genesis.
And stuff too. You got to think that
Well,
they're in their own hierarchy.
Well, that's what I was getting to.
Yeah.
So then there's man created on the sixth day. And then what does he do? He puts us in charge of nature and the animals. We name the animals. And then he says, you're in charge. You're stewards. You are to subdue, to
dominion.
put under, to have dominion. So it means they're under. So God set up the very beginning. The universe is set up in a hierarchical structure. But unfortunately, that word is a bad word now. Like, oh, the patriarchy or the hierarchy, it's bad. We need to flatten out everything.
But because of abuses by those who were on the top and how the bottom was treated. I mean, think about you could look at any social structure that did have that. There were people that were treated absolutely horrible and their inherent dignity was not honored. So you can't throw out their idea completely of where they're coming from.
But their idea is only half. So for every bad king, there's a good king. But kings themselves aren't bad. Just like
Right.
guns themselves aren't bad. People who use them to shoot people for no reason are bad. But
Police
somebody who
themselves
use
aren't
police
bad,
who
but there are
use
bad
the guns
police.
to protect us
Teachers
from
aren't
people.
bad, but there could be bad teachers.
Yeah. So
Priests
there's a
aren't
good
bad, but there
king,
could be bad priests.
There's a good king or there
Right.
could be a bad king who use that power.
Right.
And when they're not using their power, that's when the love isn't ordered correctly, because they're using it to dominate, instead of when God set up the hierarchy, it's for service. It's meant to flow in the right direction. But just like, the next hierarchy would be, it goes husband, wife, children. That's not for me to lord it over you and to say, I'm in charge, do what I say. It's that I'm called to die to myself for you and for my family in the sake of service. But that word, even talking about Ephesians in that way, it really makes women uncomfortable. But it doesn't mean I'm in charge. Listen, everything I do, you're subordinate. That doesn't what it means. It means way different. It means, like it said, it's a structured hierarchy that I'm to lead in a different way. I'm the lead as a man, but doesn't mean I'm in charge and I don't have to listen to you and I do whatever I want. I'm a tyrant. But that's happens, and that's happened throughout history. So I think because of these things, and we've had bad male, hierarchies, and the people do abuse it. So the answer is always usually an overcompensation on the other side. No, flatten it all
Right.
out. There should be no
That's what they
hierarchies.
call,
Everybody should.
throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, throwing it all out. So flatten it out. Everyone's equal. There is no more or less. The only way to make it right
Again,
is flat.
And that's what's so beautiful about America, is that idea of checks and balances, so that we don't have that, where you still have that hierarchy of government. You still have, people that have power, that make legislation, that interpret those legislations, that execute those legislations, but at the same time, they're keeping each other into check, so that you can't.
And there's a separation of powers.
Right. And so that you can't have someone become this tyrant that could eventually.
Yeah. Well, even the Trinity is set up that way, right? It's three persons, one God, but it's set up in that kind of a form too. It's a different powers, but they're co-equal. And then we get in, like you alluded to, is even the angels have a hierarchy. There's 3 levels of 3. There's 9 choirs of angels, and those that are closest to God and his throne, or the seraphim, the cherubim, those are the ones who are the closest to them. To God and to his throne.
So we just kind of just like said why hierarchies are, what they are, but what does that have to do with love?
So order is the way that God created the universe, right? So this later on in that interview, or later on Twitter, JD Vance goes on to quote this St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas, which originally started with Aristotle, which is this Christian principle of ordered love, or Ordo Amoris, okay, Amoris. And also C.S. Lewis talks a lot about this, that even love itself, there's an ordered love in the word itself. The English word love is kind of lame. Like the way I love pizza and the way I love God, there's a far stretch, and there's a hierarchy in that love. And you start at the bottom, which would be, I love pizza, I love tacos, I love going to the mall. That would be like a storge in the Greek. The Greek has, the 4 main ones that we use is storge. That's the first one. Then the second one would be like philia, where we get Philadelphia, friendship, brotherly love, where that we are friends who are both chasing after God, that we're trying to be the best person we could be. We're trying to fall in love with wisdom and truth and love and beauty and all those good things. Then we have the passionate type of love, that eros, the Cupid, the love that a man and a woman share, which is good when it's ordered properly for marriage, for union, for procreation. But when we put it out of context and it's not ordered to love you as you, instead of using you as an object for my gratification, versus trying to get close to you, trying to share my whole self with you. And then the next and the highest of all those loves, which is a hierarchy, would be agape, which is that the way that God loves us.
And it's true sacrificial love. And it's funny because, like, we went to the movies yesterday and watched, you would never think that you would get the idea of agape love from Dogman, but it's in there because you can't escape it. And that's what's funny. It's like these heroes in these movies, you can't escape what true love is, even if you can't, even if you tried, right? That in all of the hero is the one who sacrifices themselves for the other, right? And it is within, it's so difficult and it's so anti what's the word counterintuitive, right? To think that, like you don't want to ever go against yourself. You want self-preservation, right? But true love, there is no greater love than this, than he who lays his life down for his friends. There is no greater love. That line in itself, there is no greater love, shows that there is a hierarchy of love,
and within actually the highest kind.
And that within that hierarchy of love, there is a highest love. The highest love you could do is love is sacrificial. True love is sacrificial. And again, it's not an either or, it's a both and, that we should be within that context of what love is. It can't but start in our households. Mother Teresa herself talks about the West and its poverty in so many speeches. In one of her big known quote, we even have I don't think it's exactly what she said, but a form of it in our own house, right? If you want to change the world, go home and love your family. But what she really meant was that just the West has a greater poverty, and that greater poverty is a poverty of love and being loved and being seen and known. And she's saying, start in your families. She never says stay and end there, but begin in your families. That if you don't love and cultivate cultivate love within your own household, how can you go and expect those members of that household to bring it into the world, right? And then the same thing, if you read more Mother Teresa quotes, she says the same things about your neighbor. Who's your neighbor? Your neighbor is literally your neighbor. Look outside your window, like within your context of the people that are within you, then in your community. So that's exactly what he's saying in that interview, that it is a Christian principle that really should be that idea of, yes, we are all a human family, absolutely, and we should definitely, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, right? An injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That's Martin Luther King, right? That is so true. But we also need to acknowledge that there's only so much we can personally control. And if every person did their best to love those who God has put in their life, imagine what the world would look like. The problem, though, and this is where I understand the other side's point of view, is there's a lot of people that don't. So if I'm over here loving my family and I know that there's a house somewhere 20 miles from here where there is not love really happening in that family, yes, I should definitely care about that. I should think that and know it's wrong. And if I'm able in my sphere of influence to affect that change, to try to help that child or help that family, I should do that if I'm able, right? So we look at that solidarity with others, that they are a human being and they deserve to be respected and loved and known. They deserve to be treated with their inherent dignity, their value, and their worth. But I can only do what I can do in my sphere of influence. And if it comes to where I have the opportunity to go and serve those, I should take it. Like people who go on mission trips and are able to be exposed to how the other side of the world lives and what they're going through, and give you some compassion and empathy. Yes, absolutely. But if we're not taking care, if I'm going on mission trips all the time across the world to help other people, and I'm completely not being the mother I need to be to my children, I have failed in love.
It's not ordered rightly, because let's be honest, loving humanity is pretty easy. Loving those who are closest to us is very hard.
It's very hard.
It's because, I like this line that Peter Kreeft, who I always reference, he said, agape's object is always the concrete, the individual, not some abstraction called humanity. Love of humanity is easy because humanity does not surprise you with inconvenient demands. You never find humanity on your doorstep stinking and begging. And I think that's where we get a lot of this abstract is, I want to love the immigrant. A lot of this stems from the immigration problem. I want to love the immigrant. Okay, great. But is your idea of ordered love is that I give X amount of money out of my paycheck to the government and then the government does something with it? Like, that's not really love. Love, yes, we should be sending money, we should be praying, we should be doing all those kinds of things. But is it really costing me anything? It's my normal taxes that I pay no matter what, whatever they do with the money. It's not like, hey, you know what? This month I want to contribute $20 more to the government so they take care of immigrants coming from Honduras.
Right. But know that, but there should be, you should be, as a citizen, you should not be able, or you shouldn't be contributing to something that does harm either. Right. So, I mean, we could go both ways with this. Like, should our tax dollars be funding harm? Right.
Well, that's part of this whole debate, is that this is also what has to do with subsidiarity, is that as we get closer to the source of where people are at, the states are very much different. That's the way our Constitution is set up in the 10th Amendment, is that whatever's not enumerated into the Constitution would be relegated back to the states, because each state is very different. That's why there's so much mobility right now, which is a beautiful thing in the United States. If, for example, these people in California don't like what's going on in their state and the way that people are running it, they have the freedom to move to another state whose laws are a lot different. Some states now, like with the Roe v. Wade, went back to the states. So now the 50 states decide whether or not that is good for them in their state. Obviously, we want, life to be the law of the land, protected, but that's the way our Constitution is. We can't cudgel Catholicism into the Constitution. We fight and we elect Catholic people, and there are a lot of Catholic
human
leaders.
rights they
have freedom of mobility to move to where they were. And that goes same for your school district. Maybe rural, it may be something different. So those who are closest in your community, that are closest to your family, can help try to create a curriculum within standards that are something that you want. Or obviously in Utah, it's going to be a lot different than people, because majority of the state is Mormon, and it's going to be different based on what they're trying to accomplish. And that's the beautiful part about it, that out of many there are one. But we don't always want to take the solidarity route for everything. It's like trying to have Washington D.C. control everything that's going on in my household. A lot of times doesn't work. Who makes the best decisions for my son and my daughter would be us, because we know them best. We know them best because we're closest to them. Right. Even the word, which I found was interesting, we were preparing for this, I looked up what the word neighbor, where that comes from. Neighbor, it's crazy, because it's
where it says love your neighbor.
Yeah, where we're called to love God, the hierarchy, and then love our neighbor as ourselves. But even the word neighbor, when you look it up in the original Greek, let me find it here. The Greek word for neighbor in the New Testament is plesion, Plesion, which is derived directly from the word plesios, which literally means near or close by. It is the proximity that makes our neighbors our object of care and attention. So even the word neighbor isn't humanity, or isn't somebody so far away. Not that we're not supposed to do that, but when we're called to love our neighbors, I love the line by G.K. Chesterton says, love your enemy. God calls us to love our neighbors and our enemies, because they're usually the same people. Because it's true, because the people are closest to us. My actual neighbor right now, I'm a little pissy with him, because he's got a car that's broken down, that's been in front of my house for over a year, and it's like it's a battle, but I don't want to cause any problems. But he's my literal neighbor, and right now I'm like, dude, I'm tired of looking at this car that's covered that doesn't move. It's been there a year and a half, and when it snows, like the plow truck's got to go around, and technically he's not supposed to be parked on the street. But I haven't I hate my neighbor, I'm gonna call the city, I'm gonna get him in trouble.
Right. So I think that also we need to look at true love. Also, to love someone is to will their good, right?
Yeah, I will that he would move that car.
It's the best for everybody to move that car.
Yeah, just move that car.
No, but to love some, when no matter what form of love you are in, right, or hierarchy, right, whatever of all those Greek words that we just talked about and unpacked, that it still is all willing the good of the other is that love, right? So willing the good of those. So if we have a solidarity with humanity, that is the foundation of it all. It's that it's the idea of inherent dignity. It's the idea that there's a worth and a value of all human beings because they're created in the image and likeness of God. And because of that inherent dignity, value, and worth, we should look at all human beings and care about them and will their good. That's the baseline. That shouldn't end there, and that shouldn't be the primary. And actually, the idea of subsidiarity, that builds on that. Because of that, then I should be looking at my own personal sphere of influence, and I should
where you can actually make actual change.
I can actually make a difference, and I should care for that. Area first. Does that make sense?
It does. But what unfortunately happens is, and a lot of people who say they want to care for the poor, they want to do those things, they don't actually do it themselves. You know, Pope Francis has called us to go get the smell of the sheep on yourself. Like when we were at our old parish, like we were actively working at a soup kitchen, and I wasn't just, you know,
that benefited the people,
directly in our community, and we weren't getting that from the government.
Right.
We took our own money. We took turns buying things. We cooked the food ourselves. We served the food ourselves, and then we went and sat and talked with these people to get to know them. That was the purpose of it. Not, you know, they can go to the government and get welfare and do those things, but that's not the same as what Jesus is calling us to do. He's calling us to go love.
It's a higher standard.
Yeah, to look them in the face and talk to them like people and to actually go do it. But so much of the times, like people want to toot their horn, like, or put on a, you know, their Twitter bio that they're this, or, you know, or back to my neighbor. It's like, there is a hierarchy that we say always. It's like God, family, country. Like that's a known thing. And that is what ordered love is. God comes first. So already there's a hierarchy. So what do you mean? I'm not supposed to love God more than other people? Well, obviously this is the way it's set up. So it's God, others, yourself. That's joy. Jesus, others, yourself. That hierarchy is the hierarchy of happiness or joy, true joy.
And I think God is going to put, if we trust him, and he set it up that way, he's going to put people, whether we like it or not, whether we like them or not.
Those are good for us or for them, those other people.
Right. Yeah. He's going to be putting people in our lives that he's asking us to love. And sure, sometimes that's really hard, right? But
it's hard to love people that are closest to us, or it's hard to love people in front of us. Because I want to do what I want to do right now. Because
let's face it, some people can be really big jerks, like huge jerks, and a
lot of these people
not nice, not appreciative,
and a lot of people.
What is it that the one book when he talks about what is it, Divine Renovation, when he was talking about how they were trying to give away free food,
and he finally had enough because they were complaining about the free food.
People were complaining. You know, what is that? Patrick Madrid's really funny when he talks about like the ark. Like Noah and the ark, like the ark is the church. Hey, the ark is really stinky because we are around, and I think I'm in it right now, this chapter that I'm in this season or this time of year or something, when everybody and their brother is just, I don't know if it's the weather, you know,
people are we're
piggybacking off of Christmas time when everybody's really distracted and we're supposed to be all happy and joyful and we're going to party and we're getting all of our Christmas presents. We're really distracted. But now in this time of year,
this ordinary time,
we're cooped up in our houses and now we got nothing else better to do maybe or something. But everybody and their brother is on 10, meaning just not nice. And I had to send out
critical.
A series. Yeah. Very critical, not nice, not acknowledging the inherent dignity of others.
And not order love, because we should be starting within pointing our finger at ourselves first instead of pointing it at everybody else. That's an ordered love.
Yeah.
I can change me. I can't change the whole school.
And so that's hard, but that's hard too when you're in it and you're dealing with that, and you can get so easily jaded because of how people just treat you. Yeah. Right. And so it is easier to go and think about those people starving in another country and think, gosh, you know, I'm going to help. I'm going to go help. Like, I'm going to help them. But because I bet they're not rude and they're until they
show up, and then they like, well, how come he got more? How come this one isn't that?
Because that's human nature, right? But actually, they actually are. Well, I don't know, because and all the experiences I've had with people in third world countries, they're actually much happier because of
They're not,
the lack of
they're
materialism, and their
yeah.
order to love is so much better than our order of love and perspective in life. The things that they have so much more joy than we do in this country, which is so sad. Again, and I know I say this in almost every episode where I slam materialism, but we have become so materialistic as a culture that, gosh, that's just what's really killing our joy and killing our perspective. And yeah, but that's a whole other thing. But anyway, go back.
To get back, I mean, St. Thomas Aquinas is who Augustine Aquinas is who Vice President JD Vance was quoting. And basically, this is what Aquinas said. Aquinas said, one's obligation to love a person is proportionate to the gravity of the sin one commits in acting against this love. So put differently,
I don't know what that means. Can you say that again?
So to put differently, we're to love with greater devotion to those whom we have greater responsibility. For example,
I see.
Love is jealous. I can't share my love that I share with my wife with any woman I meet. Does that mean
then now I understand
that love even between us? I can't love other women the same way I love my wife.
So the more intense your love,
yes,
the bigger the sin if you were to not love.
Yes.
The way you're expected.
Yeah.
So, for example, a mother and a child to desert your child.
Yeah.
Right? To not give the love that you need to give to your child. Love is
also jealous.
Okay.
God gets jealous of our love. He wants us to love him solely. And he gets jealous when we love other gods and idols. We do those things. That's an ordered love. We're meant to do it that way. And that's the same for our country. That's the same for our community. That's the same for, I'm going to care more for my block than someone else's block, or I'm going to care more for the town I live in because we pay taxes and sales tax and property tax and the schools are there than I am, somewhere else. But if there's obviously a tragedy like the wildfires or these hurricanes, then sure, people donate to Red Cross,
and
or some people travel
for solidarity.
To go help.
And that is in solidarity and saying that you as another human being.
But to say that I give a bunch of money to the hurricane victims in North Carolina, but there's a hole in my own roof, that doesn't make much sense when I can't afford to pay for my own roof to take care of that. Yeah. It's not saying we exclude, but we have to take the things that are first. And what's going on now, that there's a huge transition in the way and philosophy and theory about the way that we should run our country. And a majority of people chose this route because there's no secrets. Like the Trump campaign, they campaigned on these things saying, this is what we're going to do. And they not only won the presidency, they won the Congress, they have the Supreme Court, a lot more state governments and these things. So this is this principle. And JD Vance is a great spokesperson for how to lay this out with charity. Because he goes on to say is that we're just doing what all these other countries have done. And I think a lot of it is, I started thinking about it because my background is a history major, is that especially after World War II, we've been so focused on helping all these other countries, right? After World War II, we had the Marshall Plan because Europe was, war torn.
We should have helped them.
Yes. So let me finish. So it was war torn. Japan demolished all these different countries. So we did, but now it's 80 years removed. And the difference is we've been helping pay and do all these things to help all these other people. Like, no one's to say that we've been doing that, but the problem is now that we've been helping so much. Now it's at a detriment. It's at a tipping point for us, that the way that we've helped people, which is nice in theory, but we just say these numbers and people just glaze over them because they can't quantify or they can't like rationalize what those actually mean. But we are $35 trillion in debt. And that's not a magic number. Like, oh, well, what does that even matter? We're not going to pay. No, we do have to pay that back. And we pay that back every year in our budget right now. This is the first time ever this year that the most expensive line item in our budget is the interest on the debt. Every year now we are paying $881 billion just to pay down the interest on the debt that we owe. It's the biggest out of more than defense. Defense, we spend more than the other top 10 countries in the world on defense. We spend more than all of them combined. Now, the interest payments is higher than that. We spend $831 billion on defense a year, but now we're spending $881 billion. And if we keep spending, we're over $2 trillion that we spend every year than we did 4 years ago. So if we keep going at this, it's not free money. We can't love people with money we don't have to rob from our future of providing for people. Eventually people want the money that we're promised to pay back when we borrow it. And when interest rates are high and all these different things, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but in actuality, if we peel back, that's like saying, well, I'm going to help homeless people all the time in my family budget. And I'm going to use a credit card and it's high interest rate. And I'm going to, these people really need it, but I didn't have the money myself, but I've used credit to do it. It's like, am I really a rich country when we're that in debt? It's like, no, we're in worse shape than most people. It's just, we look like it because we're flossing like, look at us, we're so big and bad, but in actuality, we're broke. We're living in a facade of what's going on. And if we don't seriously attack that debt, it's going to keep ballooning, and then it's going to be half of our government.
And that isn't an act of love towards our future generations of our children.
That's
in our
the order of love. It's like,
either.
well, we're caring so much for people in other countries, which we can, but when we're mortgaging our future with our country,
bless you.
then that becomes an issue. It's like, okay, and St. Paul says to Timothy, but if any man have not care of his own, and especially of those of his house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than the infidel. Because we are neglecting our future. We can't just think of, well, right now there's wildfire, so we got to do whatever we got to do. Or there's this thing going on somewhere else. Yes, we are to help as much as we can, but there's also a crisis going on right now. Here comes the
she's yet to do this.
Yes, the official
She's looking right. What do you think about this?
What do you think about that, Leah?
Okay, so helping animals all around the world, but then neglecting to take care of the one in your
this
in
is
your house.
Leah.
And just not to beat this to death, right? But it's that whole idea of that our culture also pushes that self-care idea, right? The whole, like, you got to put the oxygen mask on in the plane before you put on the kids' oxygen mask.
Because what'll happen?
Because if
you'll pass out, then you won't be able to do it for your kids,
right? If you're not taking care, not putting yourself first, though, that's it's not so much about putting yourself first, but it's about taking care of yourself so that you can care for others. That's that idea, right? And within that,
I mean, Christianity,
taking care of the
obviously,
most local level possible first. And you know what? Was this really that big of a problem like 100 years ago? Because in our modern technology, we're able to have access to all these people all over the world, right? So it's kind of like we just know so much that it gets overwhelming. We know all these things that are happening around the world that are, for some of us, so much worse than what we're going through. So I think that, able to speak for the other side a little bit, like, it is disheartening to see how some people do live, again, with the, if you have the worldview too, of that materialistic worldview that we have, it's like, oh, but when you really look and see how they live, they are so much more full of joy and happiness because they have been detached. But I can see, when we have access now to all these areas, that we should care for those things. And there's no one saying that we shouldn't. But what it's talking about is prioritizing and making sure that we're okay so that we can then go out and help others. But it really does have to happen in your sphere of influence, in the people that God has put in your life. I can't do this. Right? That God is going to put those people eyeball to eyeball. That's what matters most. How are you treating the people that you encounter with great love, with charity, especially if they hold a different political view than you do? Yeah. And that's I think what we all have to ask ourselves in this rage era, that this age of canceling someone who has ideas differently than you do. Like, we need to all just take a step back, take a breath. I think as a nation, we're in the same season that I'm in right now, in this January, February season of everybody's like on 10. Everybody's also on 10 in that political sphere. Like, we're not able to have any kind of dialogue. I think these kinds of things should be dialogue that we're
having these kind of conversations.
Having this is not an either or. This is not a me versus you. This is not
a both and.
You bad, me good. Your idea bad, my idea good. It should be about talking about what's the best of both sides' ideas and how can we come together.
St. Augustine also says that order is peace is tranquility of order. So when everything is ordered the proper way, then the world works better. If I'm loving God first, then loving my family, then my neighbors, then my block, my city, my state, then the country, then it's like, okay, well, once we have it all together, then we give so
It's the
much.
same thing as taking care of you. If you want to change the world, start with by cleaning your room. It's that whole idea of we got to get it together ourselves as individuals before we could go out and think we're going to change the world. That's why Mother Teresa said that. She's saying if you want to change the world, start by loving the people in your own home. What
Or
she's
those
saying
people
is
that you know, like personally.
yeah, God's going to put them in your life.
Well, what I was thinking, this new revolution that we have of helping people is like GoFundMe pages. That's a big deal. Like before, it's like, okay, you had to have at a bar, you rent it out and you'd have like a benefit. But now, for example, we have a good friend of ours. Her husband fell super sick, like almost died. It was like a medical miracle, but now he's not going to be able to work for a long time and she's not going to be able to work.
And
so
communities rally around those
communities
people,
because
right?
we know them.
Because
and I'd rather give money to them because I know they need it and I can help that person right now. Not to mean that I don't want to help other people. It's just that they need that help right now. And this is the best way and most efficient way to help people is because they're closest to us. Like literally, and then their goal was like $10,000. I think they're like at $20,000. And now it's like a miracle. Like he's getting so much better. And like, obviously then always be praying for those people if you can't financially give, but these kinds of things, it's like, it really does help. But then you could also do GoFundMe for people in the wildfires in California. Like pray about it. Like what's closest to your heart.
I think that's a huge thing too, is discernment. Lord, what do you want me to do with my time, talent, and treasure? Like we just did an adoration event with our whole school. And the questions they were asked in that encounter were, who do you want me to help? Like what person are you putting in front of me right now, Lord? Put them into, let me see their face. Let me see their name. Who do you want me to help? Who do I need to forgive? Who do I need to seek forgiveness from? Like who do I need to say I'm sorry to? Then what do you want me to do? Like we need to constantly be going back to him to discern what he wants us to do. And again, this is all our Christian beliefs. But if we look at how our country needs to be in that same mindset of who do we need to serve? We need to serve the people that that the government is based on first, right? We need to make sure these people are okay.
But not only that, I was thinking too, and this I'm going to share this quote from St. John Paul II, who talked about it. But a lot of these people who live in other countries, if you had to give them a choice, what would you rather do? Would you rather where you grew up and your heritage and where your grandparents and your parents are buried, would you rather that where you're at be better? Or would you want to come to Minnesota? That's nothing like the Middle East or
I think Minnesota
Somalia.
Sounds like it's a beautiful place.
I
know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. Would you rather just have help where you're at?
Yes.
Or do you really feel like...
And if we're being prudent and we're being stewards of our money, it's 12 times more expensive to relocate than it is to help where they are at. And St. John Paul II...
You also can't control those governments and who they're letting run everything in war-torn areas.
Well, we can provide aid.
Should we have allowed the Jewish people to be able to come here during Hitler's time and what he was doing to them?
A lot of people,
but did you know that boats of them were turned away from our U.S. from our shores? Yeah. So I mean, you can't. And we do have those laws to help those people that are in refugee situations. Like so
refugees is different than economic migrants. I think that's a different thing. So St. John Paul II said, as regard for immigrants and refugees, building conditions of peace means in practicing being seriously committed to safeguarding, first of all, the right not to emigrate, that is, the right to live in peace and dignity in one's own country. By means of far-sighted local and national administration, more equitable trade and support of international cooperation, it is possible for every country to guarantee its own population, in addition to the freedom of expression and movement. The possibility to satisfy basic needs such as food, health, care, work, housing, education. The frustration of those needs forces many into a position where their only option is to emigrate. So it's like, that's like what we did after World War II is the Marshall Plan, is that we were literally... that we were literally, our dog is going crazy. It's all right.
She's never done this.
Yeah, usually
every show we have, she's literally at our feet, laying down,
just sitting down.
This has never happened, and I don't know if she's got to go out.
She likes this topic. She's like, well, we'll put it this way: there's a lot of dogs. All right, out on the streets, like where I work, there's tons. And this one I took home. We adopted her from the animal. She was on the street, and we didn't go to a puppy mill. We adopted, and we have all of our dogs. Right. But I can't love the other 10 dogs that are there right now.
Right.
Like I would like to take it home.
No, thank you, but we don't even have a fenced-in yard.
Yeah. But the point is, but if I want to bring a bag of dog food down there to try to help them, that's a good sign.
Right.
But there's an order of love. I have to take care of her first because she's got to poop and pee, and I'm going to have to take her out and walk.
That's probably what this is about.
No, right now she's getting ready. She wants to eat. It's her lunchtime. And I understand that. I understand that, Leia. And I know you're hungry, and we will feed you. The show is almost over. The hierarchy of things are most important. Right. Podcast, dog, then everything else. All right.
I'm sorry.
I'm joking.
That's not true.
It's not true.
Okay, get down and lay down, please.
All right. Okay. So to end, the point is that there is ordered love. That doesn't mean that we are to use that as an excuse to exclude the other, the stranger, the Samaritan, those who. But even in loving the Samaritan, he was walking and it was in his path.
I was just going to say that. Like, he didn't go finding it.
He didn't go finding it. He was walking that was closest to him.
That God put right in his path.
And a lot of times we're too busy or we're looking at our phones that we're not even there to look at the person that's closest to us that needs our love and needs our help. So our first responsibility is to those in our sphere of influence, those who we're closest to.
Absolutely.
And if we can't look realistically in our own country to see that there is a problem of loving those closest to us in the families. 50% of families are breaking up to divorce. That's because people weren't loving properly first and close. They were looking to others or their jobs or another spouse or another person. You know, they were doing those things. And that's, our country is broken in that way. So it's like, it's because we've looked so much on more the material. We looked more on, advancement of career or all these other things.
She's just so cute. Sorry. This is really cute. She's never done this. I'm really sorry.
That's all right. It's our official, our official, she's our official mascot of the podcast. That's all right.
Yeah, so I hope we've kind of helped this.
Well, hopefully you didn't take this as political because these are things that's just the cool part is that JD Vance is talking about Catholic theology. And now the whole world is talking about Thomas Aquinas and Augustine. And people are having these arguments on Twitter. Well, that's not Christian. Okay. So now everyone's researching, like right now, that's like this Ordo Amoris. It's like everybody's looking up. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And so now it's on the topic of people. And this is something, like I said, Trump won based on America first. Doesn't mean
and
that
this
doesn't
is the
mean
thing,
everybody else.
But there are groups of people who do take that as
I agree.
Dog whistle to not. Oh yeah, I said dog. That a dog whistle to not or to want to alienate certain groups, right? And xenophobia is a real thing. Being afraid of other cultures and other people who are different than us is another thing.
It is.
And the Good Samaritan does teach us that if God puts a person in your life that needs help, that is of another, because a Samaritan was supposed to be hated by a Jew. For a Jew to help a Samaritan, that's almost like touching someone unclean. That's the whole point of that story, is that we should look at anyone that God puts in our life to help, regardless of their differences from us.
But if they're
a different religion, if they are a different culture, race, ethnicity, gender, ideology, like anything, God is going to put people in our lives. We are called to serve who he puts in front of us. That is absolutely
And this has been a problem for a long time. This immigration problem has been for a long time. But I think Bishop Barron, his homily this week was excellent, where he talked about that there is to be walls and bridges. It's not either or. It's not all bridges and it's not all walls. It's a balance in between. And this needs to be a dialogue where people can say at some point that, like what the catechism teaches us, that more prosperous nations are responsible to take in people. But the other part of the quote of Catechism 2242 says that those who are coming should do so legally and should respect with dignity the rights and the traditions of the people of the country that they're emigrating into. So, and I think that if we are honest about this dialogue, that unfettered, immigration without checking what's going on, over 100,000 people a year
It's
are
like,
dying from fentanyl.
It's honestly like letting a stranger come into your house if you have children, not knowing who they are and what they might do. I mean, it
There
really
has to be ordered love. I love my kids more than I'm going to leave my house
and I'm
open
not
to let
saying that
anybody come
person
in.
shouldn't have, that clothing, those rights, again, as an inherent.
But if someone knocks on my door and
Right.
like they need help, then I can help that person, but it's not going to be on their terms, and it's not going to be, I'm not going to know who it is, stranger danger. But there is a cost of unfettered rules and chaos. Like let's just be honest, we live close to Chicago. Chicago has had an influx of a lot of illegal immigration, and now there's real cost to that for the people who are already poor, live in a lot of communities where they're shutting down their high schools to house people, and they're $600 million short on their budget, and like that money's got to come from somewhere. So now what are they going to do? They're going to raise the taxes on a population of people who already are paying through their noses, who are going to just leave their home and go to another state because they don't want to pay, they can't afford to pay that much. And that's because of, I get it, we want to be helpful, but it's like refugees, yes, like but just because I want to come here because it's a better opportunity and I can get help, I get it.
You can, but do it the way that
we talked a lot about this on our Purposely Catholic episode. So we'll link that. You can check that out. Khalil gives a good, perspective because his parents, emigrated here and they went through the process, and he remembers as a kid, like their parents becoming naturalized in the stadium and swearing and learning the Constitution, and out of many one. Diversity is great, but if we're not united behind the things that bring us together, then all it is a Tower of Babel. That we need to be here for the right reasons to help people, but it needs to be ordered the same way that the people coming in this country would love their family first. And I want them to. That's the way it's supposed to be set up. If two kids are drowning and one's my kid and one's another kid, I'm sorry. I'm going to try to save both.
Yeah.
But if you're honest, you're not going to go save someone else before your own kid. You're just not. That's just the way it is. And I know that's a hypothetical, but that's where we're at in the world. Like, these conversations are important. We already bring in 1.5 million people legally, and we can afford to bring in other people. We need stuff. That's not the argument. The argument is that if there's a choice between helping a friend whose husband is in the hospital versus somebody I don't know, I'm going to help somebody that I know tangentially, that I touch as a good friend of mine that can really use my help. I know her and she needs help. Everybody needs help some way, but it's like everybody can help those people closest to us.
But again, God's going to put the people in your life that need the help. And just discern what he wants you to do.
It's a both and. We need to help those closest to us and help as much as we can. And the best way we can help people farthest away is through prayer. That's the free way to do it. Like, that's part of the problem here, is that like we're poor in spirit. We have resources and houses and stuff like that, but the people here are poor in spirit. That's what Mother Teresa also said in America. It's like we just have our old people sitting in old folks' homes and no one's coming to visit them. It's like because we're too busy busybodying, doing other things, but not taking the time to love those who are closest to us, those family members who are in old folks' homes, or people who are lonely or by themselves. Like, we're called to love them as well. And because we're so busy doing all these other things, loving everything else, we forget of those who are closest to us. So hopefully this sparks some kind of conversation and don't make it political. We're talking about it's
unfortunately that these things have been politicized, but it does affect policy. It does affect things have just gotten very out of hand and bloated, and it's not an either or, it's a both and. But
there are a lot of good things that are so far. I mean, whether you're at, but as far as other things that align with our faith, that there's two genders, that there is a ban on transition for kids. I mean, that's a big deal. The bishops finally came out. Mutilation of children, and especially when they have body dysphoria. It's like there's been a confusing time. So we're all praying for a return to normalcy and to increase in loving one another.
I would want to pray for an increase in dialogue of ideas and diversity of ideas.
I agree. I love a good debate. But that's the thing, going on Twitter and calling other people bad names and calling them racist and Hitler and Nazi. We all need to stop being
keyboard warriors in general.
Yeah, just calling everybody
including in their emails.
Because
that's it.
Because I
digress.
God, family, country. That's what how I roll.
You want to end in prayer?
In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit.